Hey everyone, and welcome back to the channel and to our next instalment in our Scotland mini-series. In this week's video we visit the charming and intriguing ruins of Dirleton Castle. Your journey begins with a very peaceful walk through the trees of the Dirleton estate, where winding paths take you through impeccably maintained flower beds and lawns, and the castle itself is perched on top of a huge rock outcrop that must have made it an almost impenetrable fortress 800 years ago. Although much of the fortified building is in ruins, it's still an impressive place to walk around, and there are enough interesting features throughout to keep you in awe with history of sieges, famous families and tales of witchcraft. So join us as we explore Dirleton Castle. Before reaching the castle itself, you are able to explore the gardens. They are a horticultural treasure trove that provides you with a tranquil escape, where you can enjoy the vibrant colours and fragrances and take time to appreciate the traditional Victorian garden designs. Whilst we make our way around the castle walls, at the time of filming parts were closed off due to restoration and health and safety, including the mighty and impressive gatehouse that we can see in front of us. But this really didn't take away from the experience at all, as inside there really is so much to see and explore. If you stick around, you'll see exactly why. What I also really love about Dirleton is the fact that the three noble families lived and made their marks here. The Anglo-Norman de Vaux family, the Border family of Haliburton, and the rebel Perthshire family of Ruthin. They each adapted their home in line with all of the changing fashions. What we get to experience is a combination of styles from the 1200s right up until the 1500s. But because of the castle's position on an ancient invasion route and its stormy history, it passed through the hands of many other feuding Scot families and invading English. In ancient times, the whole area was marshland, and the castle's rocky knoll itself was surrounded by a deep freshwater ditch. But it is worth noting that since there were at least 16 toilets that emptied into the ditch, it really can't have been too fresh. Shielded by a wooden palisade, which extended east to protect the castle, town, village, as well as two drawbridges, one postern footbridge facing east to the village, and one larger bridge for horse, cattle and wagon access facing south. Not forgetting the castle itself, which contained 5 round towers, 3 being D-shaped in plan and 2 donjon type, with a further 2 square plan towers that were all connected by a battlement wall hugging the rock knoll, giving the confused plan that we see today. Although we don't enter the castle through its original gateway to enter inside, we can still see glimpses of the drawbridge and the gatehouse. It was built in the 1300s and replaced an earlier entrance that was destroyed in the Wars of Independence. The timber bridge that we see today is a modern take on an earlier one. The gatehouse itself was a formidable structure, and it really was designed not only to impress visitors, but to intimidate any enemies. The entrance passageway was heavily defended by a recipe of timber doors, a portcullis and iron grills. Interestingly, they also have a murder hole above, through which defenders could drop down heavy objects or use a usual tactic of pouring hot liquids onto their attackers. If you get the chance to walk across once the restoration is done, it's worth looking up for and looking out for this, as it's pretty amazing to see still intact today. Guards would have occupied the chambers hidden at either side of the entrance passage, and there are marks left on the side walls where the guards would sharpen their tools and weapons during their long, gruelling hours on duty. As well as making the castle secure, the castle's gatehouse, elaborate defences really did highlight the lord's status of the time, and the multiple barriers that were put into place reminded visitors that they were entering into a private space of a very powerful and clever individual. Sometimes the gate of the castle would be where the local barony court would meet, and where the lord would distribute justice for certain crimes that were committed on his lands. The castle's origins were built as the family home of the Vaux family in the early 1200s, and it was at this time that the imposing towers that dominate the castle entrance were constructed. Though originally from France, the Vaux family were greatly favoured by King David I of Scotland, who gave them the barony of Dirleton, along with a considerable amount of land. Unfortunately for the Vaux, their time in power came to an abrupt end during the Wars of Scottish Independence, and after Dirleton Castle surrendered to the siege engines of the English forces, that the Vaux were forced to give up their new home. Robert the Bruce recaptured Dirleton and ordered it partially destroyed. Over the years, Dirleton passed in and out of Scottish and English ownership several times before being handed to the Haliburton family, who subsequently became extremely powerful thanks to an act of bravery by Sir Walter Haliburton in the 1420s. At the time King James I had been captured by the English, Sir Walter offered himself as a hostage in order for the Scots king to be freed. On his release, he was rewarded by the king as the treasurer of Scotland. The riches this role brought to the Haliburton family enabled them to extend Dirleton Castle extensively, with the original towers being heightened and a new gatehouse, a new hall and a tower house being added shortly after. Although the Haliburtons were wealthy, their riches were slowly spread out amongst other families when Patrick Haliburton died in 1505, due to the fact that there were no sons in the family to pass his inheritance to, only daughters. The eldest daughter, Janet, married the second Lord Ruthven in 1515, and so Dirleton Castle, along with the lordship of Dirleton, passed over to the Ruthven family. Unfortunately for the Ruthyns, they were later embroiled in a conspiracy that led to the castle being forcibly given to yet another Scottish family in the early 1600s, when Patrick Ruthven joined a group that murdered the private secretary of Mary, Queen of Scots. Although he was forgiven for his involvement with that murder, Patrick is believed to have been part of a later assassination attempt on King James VI by his sons, John and Alexander. The assassination failed and Dirleton Castle was yet again forcibly taken from its owners, and for the next 300 years it passed in and out of the ownership of various wealthy Scots. During this time the grounds were extensively landscaped, and the castle became more a centrepiece for the gardens than a family home, with the last private owner moving into the nearby Archerfield estate in the late 1600s. Dirleton Castle was allowed to fall into ruin until it finally passed into state care in 1923. Like many other Scottish castles, Dirleton Castle is said to owe much of its style to French rather than English influences. It's therefore a little surprise that Dirleton is often linked with Coucy-le-Château in the north of Paris in France. This design of a larger keep and lesser D-shaped towers set in a curtain wall can also be seen at the other Scottish castles like Bothwell, Inverlochy and Kildrummy castles. Beneath the chapel and the Great Hall are the very impressive and ginormous 4 storage cellars, which was the place to store all of the castle's provisions, including wine, ale, fresh meat and produce. The cellars down here contained a bakehouse at one end, and at a later date a postern gate that was added dating back to the 1200s. But this was soon blocked up by the Haliburtons when they made it into a large fireplace instead. The redundant portcullis slots were reused cleverly to extract the smoke. These cellars are so remarkable in size when you think about what their use is, which was just for storage. In essence, not needing this amount of excessive space, as the ceilings would be too high to hang supplies from, and it wouldn't be a good idea to overstack and pile high any provisions at a great height. It's more than likely that this reason why the cellars were so grand and large is purely just for bragging rights of the castle's owner at the time, and to show people how much supply and resource he would be able to keep. Inside the bakehouse and on one of the walls inside the large cellars once had great beehive ovens that were dome-shaped and built into the walls and lined with heat-resistant bricks. The ovens, when not being used for breads and baked goods, would be cooled down and used to dry herbs and grains. This cellar would have been hot and full to the brim with workers working tirelessly to keep their lord and family happy upstairs. After climbing back up the spiral stairs and into the chapel room, we get to explore and delve down into the castle's prison and sinister pit prison. Reached by small steep stairs, you enter inside a small dingy room with a fireplace, a window and latrine at the top of the stairs. But just below and down a grated hatch, near the fireplace, a space named the pit measured a little over 3 metres squared, with no outside light and very little ventilation. It did, however, and unusually for a pit, have a toilet. The prisons had different meanings, the prison at the top being used for petty and light crimes, and also used to confine suspected rogues until they could be brought to trial. If they were found guilty, though, they would usually be punished in other cruel ways, and it could have included hanging. The pit, though, was reserved for those who had committed evil offences, and those who were to never see the light of day again. Several accused witches were held in the castle's pit prison during the Scottish witch hunts of 1649 to 1650. They were deemed guilty on account of all findings of John Kincaid, the witch hunter. Allegedly, the accused had the mark of the devil, so these poor people were kept in the pit until orders for their execution came, either by strangling or burning them. Legend has it that a large shadow man appeared on the grassy green beneath the castle wall in June of 1649 during the trials, and many people believe that this was the devil himself, adding further to the frenzy. Electronic equipment has been known to malfunction in this area, especially in the pit prison, where the alleged witches are kept. Many visitors believe that the spirits of the accused remain trapped there, and some people experience the uneasy feeling that someone is standing behind them when nobody is actually there, or that they are being watched. It was quite the experience, and one that's fascinating to see. Finally, we make our way up the stairs to the Haliburton range for a look around the very impressive first floor kitchens. The 2 massive fireplaces here provided extensive cooking spaces. More than likely in this room there would have been several fires at one time, within the spaces cooking up a storm. The heat and the smoke were vented through the round opening that is high above, and it would have also once had slatted coverings to keep the rain out. The supplies from the large cellars down below would have been brought up from a hatch in the floor. I absolutely love the views of this castle from all of the ruined openings, just seeing how grand this castle once was. It's incredible to be able to walk amongst this beauty and have a true Scottish castle experience here at Dirleton. Our final look around is around the Great Hall, the grandest and most beautiful room in the whole of the castle, filled with paintings and trophies at the time. But it was also the main public space where people were entertained and fed in the masses. It once had a high timber roof and windows for peeking out onto to see the incredible views over the gardens and its surroundings. One of my favourite parts of this great hall is the stunning stone buffet at the end of this room. It's completely unique and something I've never seen before, but it would have displayed the family's best silverware, and it would have also been the talking point of the hall too. For royal feasts, swans were normally presented at banquets. The tough meat would be served with a sauce made from the bird's guts, chopped with strong spices and vinegar. Just one of the many lavish dishes that would have been served here in the hall. So that's it for this week, and we hope that you've enjoyed it as much as we have. We've absolutely loved experiencing what we think is a proper hidden gem of a Scottish castle, full to the brim of ornate details and beautiful architecture. A visit here will leave you full of delight and intrigue. A truly great afternoon out. Please be sure to leave a comment, a like if you've enjoyed it, and consider subscribing to the channel or joining us over on our Patreon or on our YouTube as channel members. And on that note, we would love to say a big thank you and a welcome to our latest member, Virtual Scotland. Please be kind enough to head over to give the channel a look, and if you want to consider joining us, check out our links in our description. We want to say a big thank you to everybody for their support. So we'll see you in the next one. Till next time.